Imagine getting in an enjoyable jungle trekking trip, only to find out you got lost, stuck in the same route again and again, with no hope of getting out. You are so sure that the path is correct, and yet you keep on reaching the spot where you started at. It is beginning to be an endless loop, with no hope to survive and get out of it. What will you do next? Today we will share a story from our fan named Salim. Salim is an avid lover of jungle trekking. He seeks peace and serenity in the silent forest after those hard hustles in the city every month. Every time he hears about any new exciting forest suggested by famous influencers, he will immediately plan for the trip. Just consider it as his way for healing, as well as his hobby. There is one hill in the middle of a thick forest that Salim often hears about, and there are also news of hikers and tourists gotten lost in that area as well. In some cases, some were found already dead. Such news didn't stop Salim from planning his next trip. After gathering fellow jungle trekkers in his team, the day finally came. Much to their joy, the path to the hill was straight, and not that tricky at all, despite the hill surrounded by thick forest. It would be an easy trip to watch sunset, they thought. With their map and compass at hand, and a backpack full of camping equipment and rations on their back, the group of eagerly jungle trekkers started their trip. Due to their confidence, since the route was an easy one, none of them ever thought of hiring a guide to lead them. They didn't even inform the authority about their plan either. Such overconfidence will cost them a huge price in the end. The silent path to the hill, in the middle of the thick forest, became noisy with the group's chatter and laughter. Some of them even threw plastic wraps and rubbish while they walked through the path. They had no respect at all for the nature. After an hour of following the path, Salim discovered a mark on a huge tree. The X mark was left by previous hikers and trekkers to assist the others in following the correct path. Salim and his group ignored the mark and walked into the direction they thought is the correct one. After some time, they reached the same huge tree again. All of them just laughed and continued their walk, and the same thing happened after that. They reached the same huge tree for the second time. Some of the hikers in Salim's group began to feel something wrong with the forest. What was initially so noisy and cheery, now becoming a total silence. One of the hikers suggested that they should try the path again, since there was no other clear path other than the path they had been walking on, and so they walked again, only to reach the same huge tree with an X mark on it. It was as if they were walking round and round in the same endless loop for hours already. Salim and his group stopped and rested under the huge tree. Some were already panicking and started talking nonsense. Thirst, frustration, fear began to consume them. The hours entered nighttime. Salim and his group was still stuck under the huge tree, lost and not knowing which is the correct path. The dark and eerie forest, accompanied by the sounds of the wildlife, sent more fear onto them. They were literally held captive by the forest itself, waiting to be devoured and left for dead. One of Salim's friends began to round the whole group up for head count. Instead of having 10 members in the group, including Salim himself, now there are 11 hikers in the group. Once again, silence consumed them. Their face turned pale, some even shivering in fear, unable to speak a word. A random figure beside Salim suddenly bowed down to them and laughed. That insane act shook them as they looked at the random figure, only to find out that the figure had no face at all. The figure just walked freely into the thick forest and vanished. That was the moment when some hikers in Salim's group began to scream hysterically in total fear. They even started uttering words such as, "We will die," and "This forest will eat us," only to be held down and calmed by others. Salim was in total shock. He could not say anything. His lips were tight shut. His knees were already weak. He slumped on the ground, unable to even stand up. It was their frantic scream for help that had actually saved their life. Salim and his group were discovered by a team of forest rangers who were on their night patrol from the starting point up to the hill checkpoint. The forest rangers brought Salim and his group back to the starting point for medical checkup and further treatment. They also cooked some foods for Salim and his group, as well as giving them some bottles of water to drink. After making sure Salim and his group are all right, the forest rangers then ordered them to go home. They told Salim that the hill was already closed to outsiders a month ago, after some cases of hikers and tourists gotten lost and ended up dead at the same place where Salim and his group was found. Salim and all of the hikers in his group went silent, only nodding in return, and admitted their mistakes. They were lucky to be alive and not to meet the same tragic end like the previous victims of the forest. Months after the incident, Salim still has this kind of thought in his mind. Who was the figure with no face that they had encountered in that forest? Was that figure the one who played sinister pranks on him and his group, causing them to get lost in the middle of the forest? Those questions remain unanswered even nowadays. The forest is a home to lots of unseen creatures and beings, just like how we made the cities and villages our home. Some fairies, elves, jinns, ghosts and demons do live in the forest. Be sure to respect the forest and the beings living inside them. Do not throw rubbish around. Do not talk big and mighty. Seek protection from God before entering the forest. Focus on your next destination and be aware of the signs and marks. Notify the authorities of your plans to enter the forest first and listen to their recommendations and suggestions. They know the forest better than you. May your trip be safe and nice.